specific to you. So again, welcome to Living Well. Welcome, Josephine. We look forward to hearing about your topic, Lest We Forget. And welcome, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sankey Battles. Thank everyone for this privilege of talking with us. I enjoy doing this. The research sometimes can be hectic, but when I'm done, I am happy. So the topic today is Lest We Forget. And I guess some persons might know what I'm talking about, or might have seen my slide accidentally pop up. But as we go through, I want us to pay attention, lest we forget. I'm interested in this topic because I have an aunt, maternal aunt, and my grandmother had this dreaded disease that causes to forget. So I'm very much concerned about it because, as we like to say, it runs in the family. So we had something similar about 2 weeks ago, but when the lady came on, I said, wow, she's doing something similar to me. I wanted to change it, but I said, no, I've done too much research, so I'm going to continue. So we're going to talk about the disease that causes us to forget. And this disease was first described by Dr. Alois Alzheimer, a German physician in 1906. He had a patient, and she was in her mid-50s, who suffered from what is seen like a mental illness. So when she died in 1906, and they did the autopsy, it revealed dense deposits, now called neuritic plaques. They were outside and around the nerve cells in her brain. And inside the cells were twisted strands of fiber or neurofibrillary tangles. So since Dr. Alois Alzheimer was the one to first discover this disease, it was named after him. About 3% of men and women over the age 65 to 74 have Alzheimer's disease. Nearly half of those 85 years and older may have the disease. And about 360,000 new cases of Alzheimer's are diagnosed each year. The worldwide cost of dementia in 2015 was calculated to $818 billion US. And these costs were estimated to increase to $2 trillion by 2030. 2/3 of the persons with Alzheimer's are women. It's a chronic disease. They say it's irreversible. And this disease affects the brain and causes impairment of intellectual functioning. It gradually destroys the ability to reason, remember, imagine, and learn. And they call this cognitive decline. Changes happen in different ways, at different times and speeds for each person because we are individuals. So we won't have the same thing happening at the same time. And we heard some weeks ago about the different types of dementia, but the most common dementia is Alzheimer's, which it is said is about 70% of dementia cases. Changes in the brain that are related to Alzheimer's begin long before symptoms are noticeable. And it can start about 10 to 15 years before people have symptoms, says Dr. Wall. Experts don't know what really triggers the Alzheimer's, that's what they say, but there are several risk factors that are thought to be implicated in this disease, and one of them is age. That's the foremost one, the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. Most persons with Alzheimer's are over 65, and after age 65, the risk of getting Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. After age 80, the risk for Alzheimer's increases by 50%. Then you have your family history. According to research, those persons who have a parent, brother, or sister with Alzheimer's are 3 times more likely to develop the disease. The risk increases if more than one family member have the illness. And the famous saying by George Bray and others that genes load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. So the genes they found 3 in particular, and they are there. They're attached to different chromosomes. These are not as bad as the mutation gene, the apolipoprotein, which they shorten as APOE4. This one increases risk for Alzheimer's and is associated with an earlier age of disease onset in certain populations. It is estimated that less than 1% of Alzheimer's cases are caused by deterministic genes. Deterministic genes, they're genes that cause a disease rather than increase the risk of developing a disease. And risk genes increase the likelihood of developing a disease, but do not guarantee it will happen. So genes are involved in some of us getting this dreaded disease. Then you have head injury. They call it traumatic brain injury. And there's a link between that head injury and future risk of Alzheimer's dementia. So they're saying that you must protect your brain by buckling your seatbelt, wearing your helmet when participating in sports, and fall-proofing your home. Put on your non-skid tiles, your railings, etc. So you can have something to hold on to and you won't fall very easily. Scientists speculate that inflammation occurs in the brain after a traumatic brain injury, and this sets the stage for later development of neurodegeneration, and that other genetic factors and unknown triggers or risk factors are probably involved. So now they're looking at the inflammation and brain injury. The findings come amid rising public concern over the safety of contact sports, such as football, largely stemming from revelations that some former NFL players may have sustained permanent damage to their brains from repeated head impacts. But study authors warn they still don't know the specific process by which the traumatic brain injury appears to be associated with Alzheimer's disease, and they're unable to predict in individual cases who is more likely to develop dementia later in life. And you have certain medical conditions. You have strong evidence that link brain health to heart health. This connection makes sense because the brain is nourished by one of the body's richest network of blood vessels, and the heart is responsible for pumping blood through these blood vessels to the brain. The risk of developing dementia, Alzheimer's, appears to be increased by many conditions that also are not good for our hearts. Some like high blood pressure, diabetes, they have Down syndrome, high cholesterol and obesity. Work with your doctor or other health professionals to monitor your heart health and treat any problem that arise. And then there are certain drugs that are linked to Alzheimer's dementia, like your antihistamines, your antidepressants, irritable bowel syndrome. If you have overactive bladder and you're taking medication, you have PPI, the proton pump inhibitors, you have your pain meds, and you have others. If you're concerned about your medicine that you're taking, if it puts you at risk, go and do some research and see if your medicine is among those that can put you at risk for Alzheimer's. Then you have things in the environment or pesticides, arsenic, lead, mercury. When you have long-term exposures to these environmental contaminants together with accumulation over an individual's lifetime, it's speculated to induce neuroinflammation and neuropathology. Your cells get inflamed and they get diseased, paving the way for developing Alzheimer's disease. So it is said that most chemicals cannot pass the blood-brain barrier. So I read where some persons had it and they wanted to know. And they used, when they died, they used tissue sample from the liver and the adipose tissue, the fat tissue, to check for these things because they usually lodge themselves there. So since most chemicals cannot pass through the blood-brain barrier, they have to use other tissue and not brain tissue. The relationship between alcohol and Alzheimer's is complicated. Some say that small amounts may actually protect against cognitive decline, but there's significant evidence that people who abuse alcohol have an increased risk of dementia. Alcohol-induced Alzheimer's is called Wernicke-Korsakoff. I don't know if I said that right. It's a syndrome that alcohol induces. Alcohol makes it harder for the brain areas controlling balance, memory, speech, and judgment to do their jobs. And long-term heavy drinking causes alterations in the brain cells. They can get reduced in size when alcohol is abused. It's normal for cells to die as we age, but in cognitive decline, more cells die than normal. And you see a picture of a cross-section of our brain. The one on the left is healthy, and the one on the right is where you have advanced Alzheimer's disease, where brain cells are dying. All the holes in the brain become bigger as the cells die. So we have to know about this condition. It's not a nice condition to have. We have early symptoms, memory loss. We misplace something. We're forgetting the names of places and objects, repeating themselves regularly. My aunt, who has Alzheimer's right now, some years ago, we were together as a family and I realized she asked me the same question about 3 times, but I didn't know what was going on. So I asked one of my relatives and then they told me what's going on. Okay, so That was something new to me. And you become less flexible and more hesitant to try new things. Some later symptoms, you get delusioned, depressed, and agitated. My aunt she gets agitated very easily and she's very aggressive. You have difficulty reading or writing. You forget events in your own life. You have difficulty doing basic tasks such as meal preps, choosing proper clothing and driving, and your sleep pattern changes, and you wake up a lot during the night. And when it becomes severe, people can no longer understand language and recognize family members. They can't do the basic daily living tasks like eat and dress and bathe. And they may end up in incontinence and swallowing problems. And all this tell you that they'll soon be gone. You have the mild early stage, and you have the moderate or the middle stage, and you have the severe late stage. And as each stage goes by, the condition gets worse. Communication, can't remember, can't help themselves. So these are things we should take into consideration. And if you have anybody at home with this condition, to know where they're at. In Alzheimer's dementia, there's an abnormal buildup of protein in the brain cells. These proteins are neurotoxic, meaning they cause damage to the brain cells. One of the protein is called amyloid that forms plaque around the brain cells. The other protein is known as tau, which has been found to cause tangles within the brain cells. So these two proteins are of importance to doctors as they examine the Alzheimer's patients. Here's a picture of the amyloid plaque. And it is formed from proteins and not from starch. When they first found this plaque, they thought it was made from starch. That's why I said amylase, amyloid has something to do with sugar, but it is not made from starch, it's made from protein. So when this accumulates, it is found in the brain of persons with Alzheimer's. As we grow older, certain mechanisms in the body do not work as well as they used to. And protein folding is one such mechanism. Because the protein, first it's amino acids, a chain of amino acids, and then it folds up into a protein structure. And when these proteins are not appropriately folded, they cannot carry out their biological functions. A significant feature of Alzheimer's is the accumulation of the misfolded beta amyloid plaques in the brain. These plaques, they disrupt communication between neurons, ultimately causing memory loss and cognitive decline. And here we have a picture of how the amino acids are folded. You have primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and quaternary structure. So it folds and folds upon itself until a complete protein is made. Here we have at the bottom, the arrow that points down is an unstable protein that is not folding properly. And this is a toxic protein clump. It's incorrectly folded. Those on top are better folded than the one underneath. So in the brain, when these proteins are not folded properly, that they become toxic to the brain cells. The next protein we talked about is tau protein. These form tangles within the cells. The amyloid plaques, they are clumps, and the tau protein are tangles, and all of them disrupt communication between the brain cells. So it clumps together and it forms tangles. And these tangles block a neuron's ability to communicate with other neurons. And according to a 2022 literature review, trusted source, research shows that the presence of tau tangles is positively correlated to signs of Alzheimer's. In other words, more tau tangles usually mean more symptoms. One emerging theory suggests that beta amyloid plaques, the first one we looked at, trigger tau tangles to spread throughout the brain. Doctors regard amyloid plaque lodged between the brain's nerve cells and tangled tau protein fibers forming within the cells as a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. However, amyloid plaque, consisting of broken pieces of protein that clump together, is also present in the brains of older adults who do not develop Alzheimer's, suggesting another factor is triggering the disease. And the study found that inflammation in the brain drives the progression from the presence of amyloid plaque and tau tangles to the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So that inflammation is very dangerous. The difference between people with amyloid brain plaque who develop Alzheimer's disease and those who do not appears to be inflammation, as we just said. An excessive activation of the brain's microglial cells, that are cells of the brain responsible for development, injury, repair, and maintenance, encourages the growth of tau protein tangles that characterize the disease. The study suggests combination therapies addressing both amyloid plaque buildup and neuroinflammation may prove effective against Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Tariq Pascal, PhD, Assistant Professor of Psychiatry and Neurology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, explains many older adults have amyloid plaques in their brain but never progress to developing Alzheimer's disease. We know that amyloid accumulation on its own is not enough to cause dementia. Our results suggest that it is the interaction between neuroinflammation and amyloid pathology that unleashes tau propagation and eventually leads to widespread brain damage and cognitive impairment. And here we have images of healthy brain, and the first one is a healthy brain, and the other two is Alzheimer's disease progression. And you can, if you look at the bottom picture, you will see how that hole in the middle there gets, that's the cerebral cortex, how it gets wider and wider as the cells die and the brain shrinks. And again, we have another picture. So the crosswise slice to the middle of the brain between the ears. The cortex shrivels up, damaging areas involved in thinking, planning, and remembering. Shrinkage is especially severe in the hippocampus, an area of the cortex that plays a key role in formation of new memories. And the ventricles, those spaces, fluid-filled spaces within the brain, grow larger. If you look at the left side, the spaces are small, and on the right side, as the brain decreases in size and things get worse, the spaces, they get bigger. We just spoke about the hippocampus, and that area in the brain is usually the first to be affected. You have a hippocampus on both sides of your brain, located within the temporal lobe, right here. It looks like a seahorse. This S-like structure got its name from the ancient Greek words meaning seahorse. It's about 5 centimeters long and made up of several cells layered on top of each other. While the hippocampus affects your memory, damage to it usually only targets your short-term memory, because your long-term memory is stored elsewhere. Because when you get a memory, it is short-term and then it goes into the long-term storage area. This is why someone with condition like Alzheimer's disease might remember things that happened long ago, but won't remember the names of people they just met. As the disease gets severe, the long-term memory becomes affected. Here we have a picture, try to get a picture to show the hippocampus that is affected when you have Alzheimer's disease. The hippocampus is responsible for the following cognitive functions: learning, short-term and long-term memory, visual, spatial memory, remembering the position of your body in relation to nearby objects, verbal memory, and declarative memory to help you to recollect facts or experiences. So the hippocampus, there plays a vital part in our head. The frontal lobe, located at the front of the brain, is responsible for various higher level functions like decision-making, problem-solving, planning, and controlling emotions. It also plays a role in personality expression, social behavior, and motor movements. In simpler terms, it helps you make choices, solve puzzles, and control how you act and feel. Frontal and temporal lobes have a lot of conversations. They talk to each other. So when these are affected, you would know, because the conversation they used to have, they won't have it anymore. So you won't be able to do a lot of things. With Alzheimer's, if the area of short-term memory is damaged, it will be difficult to remember where you left a specific item. So make sure you pay attention to help reduce the risk of forgetting a name or where you put an item. Constantly forgetting and its negative effects on the quality of life is a problem to be taken seriously. We like to say, oh, old age, I had a senior moment. But if it's happening a lot, constantly, we have to take it seriously and get checked out. So the cerebral cortex, which is responsible for language, reasoning, and social behavior, is later affected. So as each region of the brain becomes damaged, it cannot carry out its normal functions. So let's focus on preventing and reducing Alzheimer's disease risk with our lifestyle, how you eat and move. As we said some time ago, they are referring to dementia Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. And with diabetes, you have to take insulin. So if you take care of yourself and live an insulin-free life, we'll avoid a lot of effects of these insulin and the sugar. the sugar can go through the blood-brain barrier. And the same thing it does to your kidneys and your extremities, it can do the same thing to your brain. Sugar is toxic to the body, especially in the processed form or eating too much of it. The brain uses sugar to help us function effectively, but are we feeding it too much sugar? So get your sugar levels under control. One study found a direct link between sugary beverages and increased risk of Alzheimer's. All types of dementia and stroke can be brought about by insulin resistance and macrovascular disease. That means your blood vessels are getting diseased. So control your sugar. Movement increases vascular blood flow to the brain. The brain benefits immensely from movement. It helps us use oxygen efficiently, our nutrients or energy, and better get rid of waste. That's what movement does. Our HDL increases and to the formation of new brain synapses. It prevents the brain cells from dying. It is recommended that a 10-minute workout, cardio, walking, resistant exercise is greatly beneficial to the brain. And this one, everybody's talking about rebounding, gets lots of blood flow to the brain, stimulates the spinal fluid flow around the spinal cord, and nourishes the brain. The spinal fluid washes the brain. The spinal fluid does not move by itself. It doesn't have a pump like the heart, which pumps blood all around the body. The fluid cannot be stagnant, so jumping up and down on your trampoline pushes the sacral cranial fluid pump between the base of the skull and the top of the buttocks. So I do this sometimes. I have a little trampoline and I jump on it, but I don't do all of that. But I just go and I bounce for 10, 15 minutes to help. Not only with the movement of my spinal fluid, but to help in other areas of my health. So they have craniosacral therapy. You can go to get therapy for that. See, the lady has a hand down by the buttocks and one is up by the person's base of the skull. I don't know how to do it, but that's a way to get it moving. It's not only good for brain, it's good for if you have stress. If you are stressed and if you have a lot of other medical conditions, you can use that. Like migraines, you can use that therapy to get the spinal fluid moving, to get your brain nourished. And also have exercises to activate the sacrocranial pump. So you can go and look up and see if you can find something to do. It won't hurt one bit if you try some of these exercises. So you remove the inflammation. If you don't stop it and it continues to progress, the Alzheimer's can get worse. So get your anti-inflammatory lifestyle, your omega-3s, your leafy greens, your turmeric, and your ginger and all those things. And these can help and be very beneficial. Avoid added sugars and sugary drinks also. Some health professionals believe that if the disease is caught in the early stages, it can be reversed. It is also believed that the plaque buildup in the brain can be removed, most likely by transport across the blood-brain barrier. It can be a very slow process. And one study discovered that vitamin D3 and omega-3 fatty acids may help the immune system clear the brain of amyloid plaque. Sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, it increases your risk for dementia. The brain needs to rest. So when you engage your brain in mindless activities, because we get tired and overworked, like too much sitting down, lack of socializing, inadequate sleep, chronic stress, watching a lot of videos and endless scrolling through social media feeds, constant switching between multiple digital activities, overstimulating the brain. There's a time that the brain has to rest. So let's see if we can reduce the risk by getting enough sleep, learning new things. I'm learning Spanish, then I picked up French. So those are my new things I'm learning. And you can start socializing and spending time with others, a new hobby, or if you had a hobby before, go back and rekindle it. Read your books. I'm also learning passages of scripture out of my head. I know some scriptures, but don't ask me where they're taken from. So what I'm doing now is learning the scripture and where it is taken from. Listen to your music, but be careful what music you're listening to. A healthcare provider can help you take care of your general health and give you advice to improve your brain health. So your physical activity is good to keep your heart healthy so you can nourish the entire body with blood. Don't take any alcohol. Don't smoke because it can harm the circulation of blood around the body. Take care of your hypertension, your diabetes, your high cholesterol, and dental issues, because when we have the gingivitis and the periodontal diseases, the inflammation, infection can go to your brain, and protect your head from traumatic brain injuries. It can be slowed with the use of drugs by tackling the underlying causes, and this is being done in the UK in the clinical trials. And they also have therapies. There's anti-amyloid beta monoclonal antibody therapies can reduce amyloid beta plaques and slow the progression of Alzheimer's. One such antibody drug is donanemab. I can't call it word. And ginkgo biloba is also good for that, rich in antioxidants and used to treat Alzheimer's disease symptoms through its anti-inflammatory effects. Berries, super spicy like turmeric, omega-3, coconut oil, your dark leafy greens, these are good for your Alzheimer's. In conclusion, Alzheimer's disease is a devastating neurodegenerative disease which affects millions of people and threatens to become a public health crisis in coming years. Great strides have been made in our understanding of the underlying disease mechanisms and in early diagnosis, and the first experimental effort to treat Alzheimer's disease pre-symptomatically are beginning potential heralding an era of Alzheimer's disease management. Isaiah 26:3 says, "God will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee." So just trusting God to help us to keep our minds in perfect peace. Psalm 16:8, "I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved." So I pray and I hope that this presentation have left some lasting effects on your mind to help us to take care of ourselves and avoid getting this disease. May God bless us as he helps us to take care of ourselves. Thank you.
Josephine, thank you for such an informative presentation about Alzheimer's. It's really clear to me that inflammation is probably the key to many of the diseases that we get. whether it's hypertension or diabetes. When the vessels are affected, they can't function at their best. And so that was one of my big takeaways. And I appreciate you sharing that turmeric and ginger are things that can help with reducing the risk of inflammation. I mean, you don't have to wait till you get something before you begin to take, proactive measures to reduce inflammation in the body. Because sometimes we don't even know that we are inflamed internally because we don't feel it. But our organs are being affected by that, especially if it's prolonged inflammation. It really could cause damages to, like you say, even the vessels, the nerves. So I thought that was a really big takeaway for this topic on Alzheimer's. We'll open it up for questions. Any questions for Josephine?
Yes, I have a question. Josephine, does your study show which races are more prone to develop Alzheimer's, whether it be African
No,
American or Caucasian or whatever?
I didn't find it, but it's something we can look into because I am interested in that as well. But as they say that not the race, but women, because we live longer in most cases than men, there are more women with the disease than men. But about the population, I wouldn't say I didn't find it. I didn't take the time to look. I tried, but I didn't find it initially and I didn't go back to look for it. But that's a good question and it will be good to know. So we can do some research and find out. I hope it's not our generation, our population.
Thank you so
That's
much.
a really good question. Any other questions?
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for sharing. What I am finding out, I know that's a question that Stan asked, what I'm finding out if, what population that's prone to dementia, the research out there is showing that younger and younger people are coming down with dementia. So it's now showing up in the younger populations, people in their 60s, that they're finding that this dementia is taking place now. And another thing that they're talking about is that gut-brain health, that gut-brain connection. This one doctor, Dr. B, they call him, he's a gastroenterologist, and he was talking about how important the gut microbiome is to total health. But that vagus nerve that connects from the gut to the brain, if we have that barrier broken and because of inflammation and poor gut health, it seems that there is some kind of a connection there with dementia. So it's very important for us to maintain good bacteria in our guts. And how do we do that? Our gut, the food for bacteria in our gut is fiber. Fiber is the key. We cannot digest fiber. We do not have the enzyme as humans to digest fiber. So the fiber, when we eat fibrous foods, the fiber gets into our gut and into our colon and is there to nourish the good bacteria in our gut so that they can stay alive, so that they can fight off. We need more of the good bacteria so that they can fight away, keep away the bad bacteria from coming to cause infection and all kind of problems. So by eating high fiber foods, eating more, instead of processed foods, we need to eat more fiber. And also they talk about foods that are like kimchi and sauerkraut and that stuff, fermented food also are good for us so that we can keep that population of bacteria in our guts healthy. So that is something that we need to look into. Maybe we can do some more research and get some more information on that. But that was very interesting to me because, as a matter of fact, they consider dementia as a form of diabetes. So people with diabetes also have a tendency to have, come down with dementia because that gut health is there's that connection. The high amount of sugar and insulin resistance, and all of these things. As a matter of fact, all of these diseases are connected. And if we eat the foods that God created, that's the food we need to eat. By eating those foods, fruits, grains, beans, legumes, full of fiber, we are going to have healthier outcomes.
I was just reading, trying to look for the answer for Stan, but people are saying different things. Some are saying whites in America. Some are saying African Americans and Hispanics as compared to non-Hispanics. So everybody has their view. And sometimes you read so many things and you don't know which one to believe. But all in all, whatever information we have received, we need to put it into practice to avoid the downfall of this dreaded disease.
Any more questions for Josephine? Well, Josephine, thank you so much for sharing this information. I do know that each time I hear something, it's like, what do I need to do? I love that you talked about the trampoline and that you showed us different exercises that can increase blood flow to the brain to help reduce our risk of, developing Alzheimer's, even learning new languages like Spanish and French. I mean, we have to ask ourselves, when was the last time we actually learned something new? So again, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. And I pray that the audience will walk away with at least one thing that they will do differently, whether it's to decrease inflammation in their body, exercise, eat differently, add turmeric or ginger to their diet, to make sure that we can reduce our risk. Some things are unavoidable. Some things we can reduce our risk though, because you mentioned about hereditary. And sometimes, it may be that some family members may have had Alzheimer's, but again, it's really about our environment and we have the genes, but what we do in our environment, whether we eat, drink, or do whatever we do, our goal is to do all to the glory of God. And when we do what God wants us to do, that alone reduces our risk of some of the diseases that are becoming more prevalent in our nation. And I agree with Emma, and I'm finding younger and younger people, women in particular, who are getting Alzheimer's. And so we have to do our part to know that by living by God's principles, we can help reduce our risk. So thank you again, Josephine. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to go take prayer requests.
Yeah, I'm traveling to St. Thomas